But at the end of the day, they still struggle to do that because their business model relies on people being single, even if they say that the app is meant to be deleted. So that's just sort of a marketing message. But at its very core, dating apps want you to be single so that you can pay and so that you can be frustrated. The friction is part of the experience that they are selling you, essentially, so that you can upgrade and help them make money. And we can also think about apps like Raya. Raya in the last year, I believe, made 23 million. That is a lot of money, even for a dating app that is exclusive. They're not making this money by actually connecting people together. That's not their sole sort of that's not what they're focusing on. Otherwise, people would not have sort of the nightmare stories that they do. You know, you can think of Bumble. Bumble is a unicorn, you know, it's done very well. And at the end of the day, you know, they've even been able to go public and things like that and be acquired. That's not because they actually are, again, connecting people in a way that removes friction. So what we can bring to the table, what we ideated last time is, what can we bring to the table that's different from what these other apps are doing, you know, these legacy dating apps? How can we do it differently? Can we do it in an interesting way where it's worth it to then come into this market? So without talking further, I think let's just jump into this session. What we're focusing on is PRDs and MVPs. It's not so much ideation. What I would really like to see from everyone is that you are actually writing your PRD or really, you know, taking notes and asking questions. The biggest thing about these sessions is the opportunity to ask questions, but also the quality of the questions you ask when it comes to, you know, things like trying to assess what the problem is and how you would solve the problem. Okay, any questions before we start? Awesome. Okay, so I will take the silence as a no. Okay, so first things first, why do PRDs matter? Now, I know you guys have probably read the material, but if you haven't, when you become a PM in practice, you will be required to write PRDs. If you don't know what that is, you probably should go back and read the modules and probably shouldn't be here, but be at the next one. But yes, PRDs are product requirement documents. What that means is just you outlining everything that the feature or the product should have. Usually you will be writing a PRD for a feature, not for a whole new product, because if you're employed, you will be employed by a company that probably already has their PRD for the entire product. So why do you want to write that? You want to make sure that everybody agrees, that the team is aligned. You want to make sure that everybody understands the goals. You want to make sure that you essentially take care of edge cases as well, which we'll talk about in a second. And you want to ensure that there are fewer meetings, less friction, that the team understands what they're building and that everybody agrees. But most importantly, you want to make your users happy. This is the job of a PM, to make the users happy, delight the users. A good example of this is with Amazon Prime. Jeff Bezos, I've read a bunch of books about him. He's an annoying guy, but honestly, he's been pretty clever in the way that he's gone about things, maybe not ethical a lot of the time. But one time he made his the entire Amazon team just focus on one question: how do we delight the customer? How do we delight the customer? And the Prime team was able to come up with the ability to see, you know, when you're watching a video or a movie on Prime and you can see the actors in the scene. If anyone knows what I'm talking about, like literally watch a movie on Prime, pause it, and at any point in the pause scene, you will see the actors. And that was like the thing that really made Amazon Prime take off. That was the thing that gave them the best feedback with the customers. Customers were super happy. Everyone kept talking about it. Jeff Bezos was super happy and he lined his pockets even more. So these are the things that they might seem small, but nobody else is really doing them. Think about what other platform is doing them. And if they did, they probably got that from Amazon Prime, right? Because they could copy it, but that's a form of, I guess, that's like a USP of theirs in a sense. So it's just like, how do we delight customers? This is the product manager's main concern. So this is why PRDs are important. Now, another tip to just bear in mind when it comes to PRDs is that when you're a PM, whenever you eventually do become a PM, you'll find that it's very difficult to align everybody on something. I have never said once in my PM career, let's do this, and everybody went, yes, let's do it. You have to think of your PRD as your sales pitch. Like everything you're doing is to convince other people to do them. Even when I was a CPO, I couldn't go in and be like, guys, this is what we're doing, and everybody accepts it. No, there's always going to be at least 3 people who are fighting back, whether for any reason. Sometimes it's just because you're a woman. Sometimes it's because they actually disagree and maybe they think you should do something else instead of what you're proposing. The essence of the PM role is that you have no authority whatsoever. You just have autonomy, but you don't have authority. So your PRD is your sales pitch. Just think of it that way. So of course, we've gone over this in the modules. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. We've got problem statement, goals, user stories. This is everything that the PRD should contain. Any questions before I go on?
Nope.
Okay, sick. And then let's go to the problem statement. Now, the problem statement, just think of it as your, TLDR, too long, don't read. You have to have a strong problem statement. So it has to only focus on the problem. So you can't offer a solution in the problem statement. So our problem statement here states, someone introduces users only to, that's the TLDR actually, but someone introduces users only to truly compatible people based on deep preferences, no endless swiping, no app download until matched. This is literally the whole point of our PRD. The reason you need this is that some executives are not going to read your PRD. They're not going to be sat there reading 50 pages. Well, you should never make it 50 pages, but just, kind of get into it. So that's it right there. If your TLDR isn't obvious, your PRD is weak. So I added that little tip as well. Now, here's our problem statement. Today, singles looking to meet new people have to swipe through thousands of irrelevant profiles to find one that they might be interested in. This is unacceptable. Users want matches that reflect real compatibility without wasting time. This is my approach to writing a problem statement. It's standard, it's tried and tested. You don't need to do too much. So one thing you'll notice is that in product, we always try to use simplistic language as well. It's not like when I was working in finance, you try to sound as smart as you possibly can and, prove that you're the smartest person in the room. Product is the complete opposite. Just pretend everybody is an idiot. And it has to be understandable across the board for everyone. So this is our simple product problem statement here. Any questions? Great, because this is what we came up with last time, right? So when we were ideating, this is what we said was the problem. So then we have, excuse me, then we have our business goals, okay? So you have to think about, why are we doing this? Always start with why. So you've laid out your problem statement, start with why. From a business perspective, from a user perspective, and then what we are not doing as well. So many people don't include what they're not doing. They don't include non-goals. I think it's really good practice to include non-goals because it's very easy for the team to start drifting off and start trying to build other things. And we noticed that as well in our ideation last time. When we started thinking about solutions, we started maybe thinking too far outside of the scope of what we were trying to achieve. But that's fine to do in ideation because you're brainstorming stuff, so you can actually have moonshot ideas as well. So with our goals, what are our goals? Increase qualified matches, because if you remember last time, whoever was there last time, we said there was a problem with the quality of matches people were experiencing. How many times do you go on TikTok or Instagram and you see people complaining that the ugliest man or the ugliest girl in the world reached out to them to match with them and they took that as a personal affront? Well, that's not something we can control, right? But at the end of the day, we can try to match people who are compatible based on sociological metrics and based on what they deem is their preferred compatibility scoring. And then we can improve conversion to profile creation. This is our goal. What that means is when we talk about conversion, it just means what do we want people to do? So if we want people to sign up, then we call that a form of conversion. If we want people to buy something, we call that a form of conversion. In product, anything can be, you're just trying to convert people from not having done something to doing something. So it's about completing a task. So in this case, the task is to create a profile. And then we want to boost retention post-match. So how do we get people to not delete, there's no app to delete or not delete, but we'll get into that at some other point. But yes, how do we keep them engaged? How do we keep them engaged while still meeting our goal of actually matching them and not forcing them to have to keep being on the apps? And then user goals, we want to feel seen. We want to feel, we want the user to feel seen. We want the user to feel understood and thoughtfully matched. We want to reduce the overwhelm for app usage because, of course, we're dealing with, people who have a lot of exhaustion from dating apps anyways. They don't take it seriously. They're just annoyed by the whole experience. And then when it comes to non-goals, like I said, we have to include non-goals. Well, we don't have to, but I really, really recommend doing this because if anything happens, you can always go back and say, hey, we all agreed this was out of the scope of what we were trying to achieve. So we're not building swipe-based browsing. This is super important, or live chat rooms, or trying to increase app engagement. Okay, so retention and engagement, two different things. And, feel free to ask if you want any sort of clarifying comments on that. Any questions before I move on? Lovely. Okay, and then, for our user stories, we're now going on to, sorry, I just want to make sure that nobody is in the waiting room. Okay. Yeah, so for our user stories, what you want to do here is just write out a few user stories. I think in level 2, you'll start to see how user stories are actually written feature by feature, like breaking it down properly. But in the PRD, what I like to do is just include an overview of what that user story or what the overall user story of the PRD is. So as a user, I want to specify deal breakers up front, so I'm only introduced to people who match my core values. I think to give you guys an even better picture, what I might do is share my screen and show you guys the old version of Summon, just so that you have a better idea of what a user story might look like in this scenario. 1 second. We'll stop presenting and I'll share this page. Okay, Summon looks nothing like this, so don't even, don't judge. But this is what it used to look like, okay? So what you have here, what you'll be doing when you're a PM is your designer is going to design stuff like this, but you have to tell them what to design every step of the way. So you have to be super clear. So what that means is you will write a ticket, and when you write that ticket, it will be a ticket about a ticket with a user story, sorry. So that user story will say something along the lines of, as a user, when I come on Summon, I want to see information about it, right? And this will show you a landing page, essentially. You can't say build a landing page. That's not the approach to like communicating with designers or developers or anything like that. And we'll see more about this in the further levels. But the idea is that you come here, you say from the perspective of the user, what the user would like to achieve or what the user would like to experience. So as a user, when I join Summon or when I come on Summon's page, when I visit Summon's website, I would like to learn about what Summon is. Boom. Now you have this right person, right time thing. The contents of the ticket can then say, okay, this is a landing page. This is the text that we want on the landing page. This is the color of the landing page. It gets very detailed at that point, right? After that, you can say, as a user, once I find out the information about Summon, I would like to begin the onboarding process. Boom, you have this page. You have to describe in detail what this page is about. Do you get the picture? Because every single page, every single step of the process is essential to all of this. So you have to go ticket by ticket, section by section. There's even way smaller sections that you can think of. For example, this orange blob here, whatever my designer was thinking when he was doing this, you have to also describe that as well. As a user, I want something that gives me a feeling of whatever that feeling is. And he's going to produce this orange blob. So everything here is your responsibility to own and describe. And that means if anything goes wrong, it's your fault. I hope that gives you guys a better picture. But yes, back to the presentation. Any questions at this point? Just let me know. Feel free to interrupt. Okay, so in our PRD, however, we're not talking about specific pages or specific features. What we're talking about is basically, well, we're talking about the overall product. In this instance, we're talking about a whole feature. So you can't actually go in and start writing very small, as a user, I want to learn about someone, things like that. No, this is just the overview. So as a user, I want a lightweight, low commitment sign up before downloading an app. Okay, that's just a good idea. That's just giving an idea to the person who is reading the PRD as to what it is that we're trying to achieve. I'm sorry, guys, will you excuse me just a moment? Okay, hi, I'm back. So those are our user stories. Then for our user experience, this is where you start to maybe just talk a little bit about, for example, what we just saw, the UX steps, right? Can you guys still see my screen? Okay, yes, you can. This is where we talk about, the steps of like the user experience. So we say, fill out the personal basics, build your dream partner, get an archetype reveal, only download someone after a match is found, right? So there's only going to be an app after we have found people that are compatible. So that removes that app exhaustion. Okay. And then, like I said, your PRD is your sales pitch. This is not a finance document. It's not a chemistry report. I don't know like what sort of industries everyone is from, but this is not like a super serious thing that you just have to communicate in a robotic way. I mean, every company is going to have their own culture, but you really just want to you really want to make it, and like you want to create this document in a way that everyone's going to engage with it and be excited about what you're selling, because like I said, you don't have authority. You have to do all of this with zero authority. So you're convincing people to go along with your vision. So over here, you're saying, instead of endless swiping, you live your life. Instead of meaningless chats, you find your person. Someone isn't a dating app, it's a matchmaker for the 21st century. I hate the matchmaker term, so I'm not actually going to use that in real life, but for an internal document with PRDs, you can go ahead and just do whatever sales pitch you think everyone is going to buy. Now let's talk about success metrics, because this is the one aspect of like PRDs that we didn't get to talk about as much last time. And the idea with success metrics is you have to know what good looks like before you even start the project. Okay, so you have to be very clear on, if you're clear on why you're doing this, then it should be easy to come up with a success metric. So if you're ever confused about your success metric and what success metric to set, go back and look at why you started doing it so that you can know whether or not you were successful. So some success metrics that you can go with, a good PM always knows like the standard ones, like the daily active users, or how many downloads we get per day, or revenue metrics, like how much money this feature is able to make us, if we're able to convert people with this feature. There's so many standard ones, but a really, really good, an excellent PM knows how to get a little creative with the metrics as well. So like think beyond the basic standard, how many people download this. So of course, for our success metrics, we're going with percentage of users who complete the build your dream partner, percentage of users who share their archetype. This is important. I didn't show you in the designs, but at the end, when users go through the flow, they're asked to, or they're invited or it's suggested that they can share share someone with their friends or share to Instagram stories, those sort of things when you fill out something and it says, hey, you can share this psychological profile or INFJ or whatever with your friends. We know that we have been successful in engaging people if they are actually sharing, the journey that they just went through. Then match to download conversion rate. So we said that there's no apps, but we are matching people. So how successful were we at actually matching people and then getting those people to go, okay, I will download an app now. That is a huge success metric. That is super important. And then reported satisfaction post-match. When they actually met the person or saw the person's profile, did they think, oh, this could be my wife or my husband or whatever I'm interested in? I don't know. You can have as many partners as you like, and this has all of it. Or did they go, ew, like never again, cease and desist? That's a good success metric there as well. So if you would like to think through more success metrics, definitely just like type them into the chat, let me know what you think, what other success metrics we could be considering. And then the next part, which is also like, I guess the most serious part of the PRD is the technical considerations. Now, as a PM, gone are the days when you could get away with having no technical knowledge. I remember when I first started, I had not a Scooby what I was doing when it came to anything technical. So I had to learn the hard way, but you don't have to anymore because we're going to be covering some technical stuff. It's not going to be enough for you to just waltz into a company and be like, okay, I'm your PM now, but it will be decent enough that you can hold a conversation and actually understand some of the topics being discussed. Excuse me. Someone put something in the chat, just bear with me. Time spent on platform could be a potential indicator. So it could only be a potential indicator of what not to do because essentially we have to think back to our goal, right? We're trying to get people off the apps and we're telling them not to be on the apps. And we're telling them this is the new thing that they can download that should not be for the apps. But I will say under normal circumstances, time spent is a good metric. So you have to adapt your metrics for exactly what you're trying to achieve, right? So if our marketing message is that, hey, you don't have to be on an app anymore. We're going to do all the matchmaking for you and just send it to you when it's time for you to match with this person, maybe just to talk to this person, then ideally what we want for you to do is download the app, talk to them, maybe go on the date quicker. So ideally, we actually don't want you to do that. And the reason we can get away with not doing it the way Hinge and Tinder and Bumble and all the other online dating apps have decided to do it is because we're going to go with a completely different business model. So it doesn't have to be a business model where you can get everything for free and then you can pay £28 a week to change the height or change the what's it called, location or whatever. So it's completely it does all that for you essentially. So yes, while time spent on platform would normally be good, I would say in this case it goes against our goals. So that just goes back to, let's go back to our goals and see what it is we're trying to achieve and then set our metrics from there. But yes, if anything else comes to mind, definitely put it in there. We'll add it to our success metrics because from level 2, you guys will actually start building the product with me. You will, the next session is basically going to be us actually sitting down with the designer, going through the process, really understanding the ins and outs there. And then for our technical considerations, we have lightweight web experience, secure storage of personal preference data, architecture to handle dynamic archetype generation, social sharing integration. So let's talk about these. I will give you a small caveat. If you ever go into any company as a PM and you don't know anything technical, you will never get the respect of the developers. You will never actually be respected, because if the devs don't like you, nobody's going to like you. And the reason for that is that your fate is in the devs' hands, essentially. Just think about it this way. The role of a product manager was invented because business people could not speak to devs. They couldn't speak, sorry, by devs, I mean developers. That's just, tech language. But they didn't know how to speak to them. They could not connect with them. They didn't understand each other. Devs tend to be a specific kind of way. There's like a standard archetype, and a lot of them kind of fall into that archetype. Of course, there are exceptions, however. So the PM role was invented solely because of this, so that you could be a go-between between the developer, the customer, the CEO, the C-suite, whoever it is that needs something, essentially. So when I didn't know what I was doing, one thing that I would recommend that I actually did was that I would write my PRDs with a dev. I would get a dev to sit with me. I would try and befriend one of the devs. I'd look for the one that had a crush on me or a potential of a crush on me and get him to help me write the PRD without saying that that's what he was doing. So what I would do is I would describe what I'm trying to achieve and then say, I wonder how we could achieve that, though. I wonder if our architecture is even set up for that. I wonder if we have the right infrastructure from a, technical perspective. What does our database look like? And this is also a question you can ask when you go into a new company. What does our, how do things communicate with each other? Can you tell me, what are the databases that we're using? How do we manage everything? Is it all in the cloud? Blah, blah, blah. But don't ask, is it all in the cloud? It's usually all in the cloud in 2025. But you get the idea. You really just want to understand how it looks like behind the scenes and not just in front. This is so key, guys. So please remember that for when you go into your next role. Do not make the same mistakes I made. But in this instance, our technical considerations are, we're thinking about lightweight web experience. What does this mean? We're not going out with an app because we just said there is no app. We're telling people, delete your apps. The apps don't work. So delete them. And in order to say that, we can't be coming out with an app as well. That would just seem snarky. It would just seem like we're talking shit about Hinge and Tinder, but not actually trying to make a difference. So what we'll do in this case is actually go out with a web platform first. So that can be a mobile web platform or like an actual website. And so our technical considerations need to bear that in mind. Secure storage of personal preference data. You need to think about things like that, even though they're boring. Architecture to handle dynamic archetype generation. That's just a feature within what we're doing, which we don't have to get into right now. We can talk about that some other time. But do we have the architecture to be making changes as we go along? And by architecture, I mean, can our back end support that kind of dynamic behavior? Or is it going to crash when people are using it? Is it going to stall and be slow and annoying? And are people just going to give up and exit the flow? Okay. And then social sharing integrations. When we say share to TikTok, share to Instagram, basically what we're doing, can we actually do that? Do we have the back-end support to be able to do that? Or are we going to run into issues there as well? Nowadays, there are probably integrations that we can do with platforms that already provide that kind of service, or tools that provide that kind of service. So maybe we don't have to worry too much about that. But then we'll have to think, how will the integration run? How long is it going to take? All that good stuff. So we really just have to think inside out as well. Don't only think about what the product looks like, think about what is behind it and how it operates. You will not last 2 days as a PM if you are unable to do that. I cannot stress that enough. Okay, any questions? Okay, thank you. You're welcome, Gloria. Yes, absolutely. I will say one thing for our success metrics in real life. My success metric was that I need to have 10,000 people go through the onboarding to decide that I'm going to build an app where people can communicate after matching. So this is important because what I'm doing right now is I'm building an MVP. This is a minimum viable product, right? So essentially, a lot of people, most products would actually just go out, build the MVP, give it to people and see how they feel about it. But I don't have the same resources that, I don't know, like somebody who is doing this with lots of support would have. What I did have when I first started out was like 5 grand allocated for this. And I quickly ran out of that money because development costs are really high. So you have to do so much with what little you're given. And that's why I decided I'll go with a website. I'll go with a web app. I will communicate it from a marketing perspective as like a good thing. And I will get 10,000 people to download and, sorry, not download, but to go through the process. And when they do, I will decide, okay, I have enough of a market where I can go to someone and say, hey, give me some money, let me build this thing out or whatever. So those are just some of the success metrics you can think of. And then let's talk about milestones. Now, the people who will be super interested in milestones as well, honestly, everyone, but your CEO or your head of product, whoever it is that you're going to be working under, is going to be very, very interested in this part so that they can blame you when you do not meet the milestones or deadlines, okay? The truth is, in product and tech, there are no deadlines. It's not really like project management where you set a deadline and that's it. There are probably target dates, desired dates, but more often than not, you will find that developers could say that it will take 2 weeks to build something, and they will not do it in 2 weeks. It might take 2 months instead. I had a very annoying CTO that will always go above me to tell like my CEO or whoever, that he could build what they were asking for in 2 days. 2 days. Let me tell you guys, the thing he said he was going to build in 2 days took 2 years to build. I kid you not. Obviously, I don't know if he was like a megalomaniac or something. I don't know what it was. I don't know if he was just dying for the attention, but you will have people like that that will say things like that, and just don't believe it. If they tell you how long it's going to take, don't believe it. And that's why we have the scoring system of like Fibonacci scoring systems. There are a bunch of scoring systems to see how, not how long, but how much effort something will take. And we'll get into all that in level 2, but the idea is like a developer, you sit down with your developers and they tell you this is going to be a 1, or it's going to be a 2 or a 5 or 13 or 21. So I will sort of guide you through that as well, and how to, get those numbers from developers and things like that, and what that really means in the grand scheme of things, how much effort, how much capacity you have.
If that's okay.
Yeah.
So when you're asking developers to kind of estimate the times that it will take to complete things, do you think they generally give a good estimation that it ends up being that kind of time frame, or is there ever spaces where they're trying to make themselves look good by saying that they can do it quickly and then you have to kind of put in extra buffer time, or is it just different for each individual one?
Yeah, I think it depends on the company. It depends on the company because it depends on the culture. I've worked in places where they were very toxic and they wanted developers to deliver very quickly. So to get you off their back, the dev will just tell you it will be 2 weeks, even though he knows it'll be 2 months. He can buy himself time with that. And then you have some cases where maybe he doesn't want to work so much. Maybe he's going to be in Ibiza while pretending to be in his home office or something. So in that case, he's probably going to tell you, oh, it'll take 50 years. And he did it already and it's just sat there. He's just not sure if he wants to, repo it or put it through or whatever. So it really depends. What I will say is always put a buffer. If you want it done quickly, and they give you a date, just add 2 weeks. Whatever it is in your mind, kind of do the opposite of that. If you think you have time, just, never mind it. But like, even if what I'm trying to say is like, if you think something will take a short time, or you want something to take a short time and they tell you it's going to, give it some extra time in there as well. Like, just never go for it. But that's why you should never ask a developer how long it will take. This is a huge, huge rule. You should ask a developer how much effort it is, and then they will give you a number that corresponds to something that we actually use to measure effort in product. So they could tell you it's a 5, and then you can put that into perspective for what that looks like. But it depends on things like capacity, how much capacity you have. To give you guys an idea, when one day when you become a PM, you will sit down and you will sit with your devs and you will ask them for these effort numbers, right? If they give you the numbers, you will start to see them sort of average out nicely. And what will happen is, maybe in 2 weeks, a 2-week sprint, you will complete 110 numbers, like 110 combined. Some people might have said, oh, they can do a 5, they can do a 10, they can do a 21, whatever, but you'll complete 110 numbers. And so moving forward, what you'll be able to do is plan every time for 110, every time to achieve 110. So you know that you can only do blocks of 110 with the number of developers you have. It's so much that we can say about this topic, but yeah, that's the idea.
No, that's really helpful. Thank you.
No worries. So with milestones, this is what we're talking about, right? So you can take those numbers that the developers give you and try and give an estimate yourself to the CEOs or whatever, but your role is also to assure them that, listen, it might not take this time. Be as realistic as possible. Be as truthful as possible. You're not the one building it, so they're not really going to directly blame you for the time that it takes, but they will blame you if you said it will take 2 days and then it doesn't. So just keep that in mind. So as you can see here, we have 4 weeks for our launch. And the reason it's 4 weeks is because when we get to level 2, what we'll start doing is actually building. Okay, so our week 1 will be to build the basic sign up and the core filters. Our week 2 is to build our archetype generator. Our week 3 is to launch a shareable archetype card. And week 4 is to introduce first live match notifications. Okay. Any questions before we move to edge cases? Okay, awesome. Let's talk about edge cases. Have we actually come across edge cases yet in the level 1 anywhere? Okay, that's fine. So with edge cases, what that means is just, let's say we planned for a feature. Let's say we said we want a feature where people can click on a button and buy whatever they want to buy from all the different stores in the world, right? We have to think about it this. Let me be clear about that. Let's say I'm saying, as a user, I want just to go on one website, click on a button, and all the 500 things in my cart, in all my websites that I have I have something in my cart. So whether that's ASOS or Asda or whatever, I just want this to go ahead and buy all of it. That's a terrible feature, but we're just going to run with it. Okay. So the idea here is, what happens if, for example, one store is actually not in the database. So I'm able to order from everybody except that one store. What would happen then? This is what an edge case is. What, in the unlikely case that we're not able to seamlessly achieve what it is that we're trying to achieve, what do we do? So you have to ask yourself this every time you're building a feature. And you have to try to ask yourself this before other people ask you that, because when you become a PM, I know I'm making it sound terrible every time I like open my mouth. It's honestly not, but in the first year or so, it can be really hard and annoying because people don't really think you know anything, and your job is to tell them what to do. So how can someone who doesn't know anything tell them what to do? So people will try to poke holes in your features, in what you're doing, in your PRDs, in the things you say, and you have to be ready for that. So the edge case will help you do this. Try and do an exercise to understand, what if something doesn't work the way I think it will. Try and anticipate what people will ask you before you can even have to answer the question in front of other people. And the reason you have to do this is because you have to empathize with the customer, right? So you have to think from the customer's perspective. And many things people will poke holes into will actually be valid. So as much as they'll do it in a way that might be rude or trying to like put you down or whatever, it will be valid. So you really want to beat them to it. Okay, so now what if there's no match found, right? You have to ask that question. What do we do then? Do we reach out to the user? What do we do? Can anybody think of like, what could we do if there is no match? You've filled out the form. Okay, try and put yourself in the user's shoes and then also in the shoes of everybody else, because that's kind of our job. You fill out the form, you've done everything, and we told you, okay, wait, we'll let you know when you get a match. And 2 years have passed and there's no match.
Maybe we could introduce something where we periodically check in. So instead of waiting sort of 2 years to say, no, we still don't have anyone, and people can change. So maybe sending like a small reminder to say, oh, look, we're still here. Have any of your things changed? And then that keeps people coming back and like sort of more likely to increase the conversion.
Fantastic. Literally what I was hoping to hear. Fantastic. Girl, you're going to be a PM next week, so get ready.
Let's see.
No, that's brilliant. That's perfect. So do we just let our customers go because there was no match? No, we have to reach out with something. We can send an email every once a month or something. Oh, we're recalibrating. We're still looking. Looks like you have really high standards and we love that for you, girl. So maybe you want to go back in there and maybe adjust, but not telling you to bring your standards down, but just like make some changes because there are so many people out there in the world for you. That's a great way to communicate with your customer, right? Can we think of anything else we could do there? Okay, that's fine. So then we have conflicting filters. Some people might set really narrow requirements, or they might say that they want a Christian and a Muslim at the same time, which is possible if you're from Sierra Leone. I hear that that's really a thing there. If there's anybody on the call from there, confirm or deny. I hear that some countries have like multi-religions, like people can be multi-religious. Maybe they chose to have a Democrat, Republican, maybe they chose whatever, obviously we have to account for this when we're building. So when you're writing your tickets, you even have to think users should only be able to pick one of these. You have to really go ahead of the user and like put yourself in their shoes and make sure that you're answering these questions. But what if a user sets a very narrow requirement? What if a user goes on there and says they want a man who is 6'5", works in finance, blue eyes, but what am I missing? Trust fund. And that's exactly what they want. They don't want anything else. Well, we don't know, but that's what they said they want. What could we do then? Anyone?
We could add something that had like a feature as a sliding scale. So if they said one specific thing, like for example, works in finance, we could then ask them how important is X quality. So we're not just listening to the stereotype, but we're making it into an archetype. So for example, if it was somebody that puts themselves as being traditional and they really want to raise children, then we could go on to ask them another notifying question of how important is it to you that you get to stay at home with the children? Mm-hmm. And then they could do a sliding scale from maybe 1 to 5. Or how important is it to you that your partner is then the breadwinner? Because there's a lot of people that say they have those traditional expectations, but maybe they also want to work as well. Or maybe they are happy to have part-time work or something like that. So if we don't just stick with stereotypes, but give people the option to add that how important is it to you section, then we can kind of get that crossover of the Venn diagram of the two different stereotypes together.
Fantastic. That's a great answer. And you'll find that when you start to work with your UX designers, those are the people that you sit down as to like how that question should appear. So it's not so important how it should appear because that's the UX designer's job, but it's important that you communicate that we want people to be able to have the power to make that decision on their own, and just give them more tools to essentially make the decision. And then with being a PM, you'll see that there's advantages and disadvantages to every decision we make, because then you'll have to think, oh, are we doing that for every single question? Are we going to overwhelm people? Is it going to make them drop off from the onboarding? And so we'll fall short of our success metrics. You really have to overthink everything, but that is a great suggestion. And I love that one. Anybody else can think of something that we could do?
I was going to say, would you send the user like maybe profiles of people that tick maybe 4 out of 5 of the boxes? So here's Greg, he's 5'8", he works in finance, he has a trust fund. He's not 6'5", but he has
5'8".
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing, like suggestions of people that are close enough. Yeah, just like it's I know it sounds silly, but it's like when you're shopping on Amazon and it's like, okay, this is it's not the exact fit, but close enough fit, which could work. Yeah.
Exactly. No, that doesn't sound silly at all. That's exactly it. And I think that's what Remy is talking about as well. So you guys are definitely thinking in the same direction. And also when you become a PM, you have to think about other examples of products that might already be doing what you're doing to help describe what you're talking about. So definitely you're thinking right. I also had a situation where, when Instagram started to tell people that what they were looking at was AI. Do you remember when this feature came out, maybe like a year or two ago? Oh, no, it wasn't 2 years ago. It was definitely probably last year. Anyways, late last year, I was working on a project for Canon. I was just like a temporary PM, a consulting PM. And I was telling the people there in the room that like, I think we should have like notifications that something is AI, and they can do that from, we can say like, okay, like whether we were working on something very specific. So it made sense for that. It wasn't actually telling things in the camera that it's AI. But people shut it down so fast. They were like, no, like AI is like, we don't need to tell people stuff. People don't want to know that what they're looking at is AI. People just want to look at stuff. And tell me why a week after the rejection, Instagram brings out we're telling you this is AI feature. And I was like, oh, I didn't hold back. I was like, guys, remember when we were talking last week and you guys said, well, guess who just did it? Instagram, bitches. I didn't say it like that, but like, I definitely did not. I was not humble about it. So yeah, always try and use like, before you even go into a meeting, think about how do I present this in a way that's already familiar to people, because they're more likely to go with the ideas in that scenario. A lot of people talk about how they want to innovate. They actually don't. Okay, so that's a great idea. And what I call this for Summon, I actually call this feature soft expansion. So it's thinking about a confidence interval. If you've done any kind of statistics before, it's just like thinking about how far below or how far from our metric do we actually want to go. So if a user says they want someone who's 6'3", perhaps showing them a 5'8" person, not the nicest, but like Remy said, if they meet all the other criteria, perhaps we could forgive that. Or maybe we show them people who are 6 foot and no trust fund, but have other great qualities, okay? And then what if we have the wrong archetype feel? Now, the idea behind the archetype is that after you fill out everything, we tell you who you would be most compatible with based on your answers, right? So it's like deeply psychologically researched. What you could do, well, I'm not going to tell you what you could do, but what we have done in that scenario is that we then provide like a summary, like this is your archetype. You like the Doberman. Well, we're not doing something as corny as that, but oh, you like the Doberman, or you like the golden retriever or something like that. What can we do if the person who's reading it then goes, I don't like that. Like that is disgusting to me. Any ideas?
Maybe sort of allow them to revisit what they wrote down, and decide sort of, I don't know how to explain it, but a lot of people can backtrack on what they've originally put down. So allowing them to sort of see what has already been put down, seeing if there's maybe a limit that can be set on how many things can be a deal breaker. So like not everything can be a deal breaker. So deciding exactly what people are sure about, go with that, and then because they have more flexibility in other things, they can sort of calibrate what they do and don't want, and then the archetype becomes a bit more holistic rather than everything being a deal breaker, then them not being happy with the result.
Miriam, I think you're going to be a PM for sure. Definitely. Like if that's why you're here, then definitely you're getting that. Like you're landing your role within like 3 months, trust. But yes, 100%, you should absolutely give them a way to do that. Now, the way to do that is the real problem that needs to be solved, right? How do we show people, how do we get people to sort of be able to, first of all, relate to what they have seen in the archetype? Of course, that's by doing it right in the first instance. But in the instance that they don't feel like that's right, perhaps we could allow them to edit the summary. Like we could allow them to edit, and then it updates. We could integrate with AI and rename the archetype even, ask them to write whatever they want in there. Maybe they can't like go back and change things because of course this is a summary based on the form that they've already filled out. But what they could do is just add to it, or maybe they enter back into the form very easily. We have to make sure the journey is seamless, but they can enter back into the form and make changes in the form that will then reflect in the archetype summary. So yeah, anybody else? Any other suggestions? Cool. Okay, so those are just edge cases you should definitely think about before you go ahead with a build. And then let's talk about marketing needs as well. So when you're a PM, you also have to think about how you're going to sell the product that you are building. And you have to work with marketing very closely. Luckily, in most companies, actually in every company I've worked at, marketing people were always cool to work with. They were very fun. They always have a budget. They always know how to spend it. Look at, for example, Duolingo, what their marketing team is doing. Everybody knows the Duolingo team, Oatly team. You know, those people are going to be working very closely with product to ensure that the success metrics are being communicated adequately, the goals are understood, the way to use the features. At the end of the day, it's your marketing person that's going to sell these features, right? So you have to make sure that you're working really closely together. So for example, our positioning is that Summon is not a dating app. That's not the angle. We're not going with the dating app angle. The messaging is all about no pressure, just thoughtfully match, go ahead, live your life, and you will find, when we find your person, we'll let you know. And you just kind of have to really think about the user, like put yourself in the user's shoes, because we're thinking about how a lot of people are very dissatisfied with the dating scene. So the first step in that, and the first way to hit your competitors, is by getting people to delete their dating apps. And you guys are going to see very soon when someone launches the campaigns are not going to be telling people to download Summon. The campaigns are going to be telling people to actually delete other dating apps. Like, just delete your dating apps. Your husband's not there. Your wife's not there. It doesn't work. You've deleted it and re-downloaded it 50 times. That's not because anything has changed. You haven't changed. Why do you think other people have changed? So it's really tapping into the sentiments that people already have right now, tapping into their dissatisfaction and creating a messaging that helps build community around that negativity, really. So yeah, that's the vibes that we're going to be going with. Then you want to think about things like lead generation. It really depends on what industry you're in, right? Like virality mechanism, that archetype card that we're getting people to share, that's going to help achieve the 10,000 success metric goal, right? So at the end of the day, if you fill out a form and then you share something and say, hey, like I use this really cool product, and I think there's going to be something coming soon. I think it's a dating app, whatever. Even if they call it an app, it doesn't really matter. Nobody cares as long as they're sharing. So you can see how all of this ties into everything. Every single decision that you make as a PM has to be intentional and well thought out. And like I say, you're going to be working with all the different teams. So whether that's developers, marketing, C-suite, or heads of customers, you're going to be interviewing customers, and there's a way to interview customers. For example, if you saw a video that I put out, I think today actually, I was talking about how I was interviewing women, and I've noticed women have poor boundaries when it comes to dating. If you look at the way I framed the question to learn about this, I asked them, what are your deal breakers when it comes to dating? Like, what are your deal breakers that you would never, ever tolerate? And they told me the deal breakers, but I didn't follow up with a question about their deal breakers immediately. I waited till the end of the interview to ask them, to tell them, I think I know someone that would be perfect for you. They're 6'3", they've got this, they've got that, like they're so kind and they're, you know, whatever. And then I say, but actually they've got that deal breaker that you mentioned. And most of them, an overwhelming majority of them, 92% of them, were more than willing to go backtrack on that deal breaker. Whereas when I asked the men the same thing and did the same thing with the men, they were like, yeah, nah, I mean, I would still love to meet her, but like, I don't think I'm going to do anything. You know, I'm not interested in doing anything. I can't take that kind of person back home to my mom or whatever. Like, their answers were around that. But if you focus on the framing of the question, that's a skill that comes with being a good PM, because you can't ask customers what they want you to build. You have to understand their problems, and the way to understand their problems is by getting into their brain. Any questions? Does that make sense? How are we feeling about this?
It does make sense. I just had a question in regards to the what if section that you had. So if you were in a meeting and somebody had a what if that completely threw you, and you needed time to think about it and get back to them, how would you handle it? I'm sure it's happened millions of times.
That is a great question. Luckily, it hasn't happened in a long time. There isn't one way to do it. You really have to get creative, because the last thing you want to look is stupid, okay? And that's why when I first started out, I was always getting questions like that, and I would always be thrown off. But what I started doing over time, and at this time we didn't have the resources to know how to do this, so I think I just had to creatively figure this out on my own, was that I had to treat the PRDs as a group project versus as something that I'm writing. Because when it's a group project, nobody's trying to throw you off. What I do then is, like, I engage, for example, the developers, the technical team. Those are the people that always be trying to do shit, right? So what I do in that scenario is, like, I actually sit with them and I'm like, hey, like, this is our PRD. I put their names as the sponsor of the document. I put them down as like created by me and you and everybody else and like all the key people, because this is our responsibility. Fair enough, it's my job to sell it and push it, but what I started doing was selling it on an individual basis first. So I make sure I have good relationships with everybody separately. I go to the CTO and I say, hey, like, this is what I'm thinking of doing. What do you think? You know, even though his idea is shit, first of all, he's going to be glad that you came to him and that he's valued. Second of all, he's probably going to point out some very valid things that maybe you didn't think about, but you can be like, yeah, like, that's actually true. I was thinking about that. You know, it's just really making sure that you are building those connections so that when you finally go to present this should not be the first time anybody is seeing it. Everybody should have already seen this. And the likelihood that anybody will say something that will throw you off is very low. But in the event that that does happen, then you really have to play it off as like,